From the deepest, darkest recesses of Dangerous Nerds headquarters, Keith Moncrief and Gerry Kissel.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Pop Culture Minefield. That's Keith down there.
And that's Gerry. Whoop, that's Gerry.
Yeah, that is Chuck Dixon, one of the most awesome comic creators in the history of modern comics.
You know it.
And he's a goddamn badass son of a bitch, I tell you.
I'll get you.
And you know, Chuck and I've talked a lot. Chuck was the first job I got from IDW. Wow. And he was my first comic pro friend. And,
so you're the one.
Yeah, that's my fault.
God damn you.
I was an enabler.
There you go, enabling me to do my comic stuff. But Chuck is a great writer, and I've enjoyed his writing for a long time. And I find it fascinating, you know, when those mornings when I wake up in the morning and go, gosh, my life sucks. I remind myself I know fucking Chuck Dixon, Graham Nolan, Dale Dye. I know all these Kelly Jones, you know, and if you mention my name to Ted Adams or Chris Ryle at IDW, they go, oh, say hi to him for us. Because I've known him for years, you know, because my first job for them was doing the comic trailers. I was an animator, director, and I scored all the music for him, including All Hell Megatron. I had to, I told this to Rick Stacey, I had to recreate the Transformer theme without infringing on the copyright of the song. Because they didn't want to pay the $10,000.
Of course not.
And so I did it, and they're like, holy shit, you really can do anything. They didn't know I could draw at this point. Tom Waltz walks in and says, you know, Gary's really an even better artist than he is an animator. They're like, yeah, whatever. They started doing that laugh of Jane Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man. And he walked in with a printout of my fucking portfolio, and they hired me immediately to work on your comic.
Huh. Wow. Cool.
And I was tickled pink. Or as Hubert Humphrey would say, pleased as punch. And yeah, you would remember that, Keith. I don't know if anybody else watching this will remember who the hell Hubert Humphrey is. But what got you started down this road? Were you a liar? Were you a liar as a child?
A liar? No.
All writers were liars.
Oh, that's terrible. That's not. No. We reveal truths. We're not liars.
That's right. You reveal truth through embellishment.
I just make stuff up, which is different from lying. I
agree with you, by the way.
Because everybody knows I'm making it up. I'm not trying to convince you that this is real. Yeah, I can't remember a time when I didn't like comics. I mean, when I was a kid, comics were literally everywhere you went. You visited somebody's house, there were comics. If you went to the barber shop, there was a stack of comics. You know, every drugstore had comics. The farmer's market had comics, just everywhere. And you know, if you went for a ride in the back of another family's car, their kids' comics were in the back seat. I mean, it's just literally you couldn't get away from them. And
barber shops always had comics.
Oh yeah, always. So you know, at damn highlights, that means the doctors didn't have it. You know, doctors' offices didn't have comics. But I just grew up around comics, and the medium fascinated me. And like so many comic creators, I was sick a lot as a kid, and I had a lot of time on my hands. So I began drawing my own.
Yeah, this guy too. I was always sick as a kid.
Yeah. A lot of comic creators, they're part of their origin. It's like gamma rays. Part of their origin is being sick a lot as a kid. That's how they got into it.
That's fascinating because I'd never noticed that before. But it's true because I've talked to other comic artists and they, oh yeah, I went through spells as a kid. With me, it was chronic tonsillitis and adenoids, and I was sick all the time with it. Yeah. What was yours?
Mine? I was born with massive facial deformities. I had 7 surgeries by the time I was 6 years old. So I was the first recipient of an artificial palate. There's there's a notch out of the cartilage on both of my ears, and that's what they made.
I've never known this about you.
I don't talk about it a lot because I'm not looking for sympathy, but it's, I spent a lot of time in the hospital as a kid. When you're a kid, you don't know any different. That's just the way the world was. And hospitals back then were different. Man. You were in a hospital, you were with like 40 other kids in a ward. So I was popular because I always had comic books. So I would either lend the comic books to kids or I'd actually read the comic books to kids who weren't old enough to read.
What was your favorite comic?
Wow.
Spider-Man was the be-all, end-all for me when I was little. I love Batman, of course, but Spider-Man came along just at the right time for me.
Well, we're the same age, so yeah, it was the same thing with me.
Yeah, it's like this is a brand new thing, and I bought all of Stan's marketing BS, which I don't think was BS, about how I was a special reader because I like Marvel comics. It was brilliant. That guy was brilliant.
Well, the thing I think all of us liked about Marvel was the fact that Stan put them in real places, not imaginary cities that were like other cities, and he gave them real problems that we kids were going through, especially Spider-Man.
Yeah, there was an emotional through line to all the books that DC Comics simply didn't have. I mean, DC, their idea of an interesting personality was that Barry Allen was always late for his dates, even though he was the fastest man alive. It's like, and they really never moved beyond
that'll make him identify with him.
Yeah. It's like, oh wow, okay. I'm 10 years old. I can identify with the guy being late for his date.
That's so true. And so for you as Spider-Man, what were you going to say, Keith?
No, I was just going to say, did it, being 10 years old, I mean, did it also, at least as far as DC was concerned, did you at least admire or understand Robin, the way the character was written?
It's really weird, but I didn't like Robin. I didn't know why he was necessary, and it really wasn't until I had to write Robin and had Denny O'Neil explain it to me why Robin was so necessary to the franchise and why he was so important. And in my conversations with Denny, I said, it's funny now that you're talking about it. I said, I realized that all of my favorite Batman stories had Robin in them, or were Robin centric. And my favorite story of all time is The Strange Costumes of the Batman. And it's essentially
I remember that one.
Yeah, so essentially it's a Robin story. Robin dies at dawn, and there's a bunch of them. And so yeah, but when you're a fan, you get it all wrong. You really don't understand what makes these things you like so much work.
I remember I had a personal experience with Denny O'Neil. I got a form letter rejection from Marvel back in the 80s. And but Denny O'Neil actually communicated with me. And I had a handwritten letter from him that I had for years. And in one of my many divorces, I lost it. And it meant so much to me because he actually hand wrote this letter and signed it. And as to, because in the 80s, when I first tried to get a job at DC, the problem was that they were still in that in-house artist thing where you worked there at the shop. You had to kind of have a name before they would work with freelancers. It was a lot rare. And that's what he wrote to me. And he said, if you want to do this, you need to come here. And I'm like, I've got a kid and I'm married. I can't do that. I can't afford New York. Because my cousin was up there and she told me how much it was. She's like, come up and stay with me or something. I'm not going to do that. So I just chickened out. That's why I didn't go to work for DC.
Wow, you got a nice letter from Denny. That's a rarity.
Yeah, he was really nice to me.
Denny,
but I was a good artist, so.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I love Denny, but he's a prickly pear. You catch him on a bad
I must have caught him on the right day.
Yeah, because there's Cam Kennedy, an artist from Scotland. He used to hang out with Alan Grant and John Wagner, two writers from Scotland, and they saved up enough money to send one of them to New York to go to DC Comics and try to get work. And Cam won the coin toss. And I think it was Joey Cavalieri told me this story. The guy shows up and he doesn't know anybody. He just shows up at DC. He's got this thick Scottish accent. And so Joey says, well, I'll take you around. And he takes him around, and here comes Denny down the hall. Denny's just coming into work, coming down the hall, and Joey says, "Denny, this is Cam Kennedy. He came all the way from Scotland to meet you." And Denny says, "Good for him," and goes in his office and slams the door.
Oh my God.
So
Oh my God.
And I mean, I remember going, the only time I ever pitched to Denny, I actually pitched to Dan Rassler, his assistant, while Denny sat in another part of the room and didn't even look at me.
Oh my God.
But then, then we worked together closely for, 10 years. I love the guy, but he's just one of those guys you got to get to know.
Man, and when did you start writing professionally?
I started writing in children's books, believe it or not. I wrote some Winnie the Pooh word books, and I wrote a Raggedy Ann and Andy book. And I was kind of...
I'm totally not surprised by this because I've read your SpongeBob work.
Okay. And I had the greatest interview of my life was with the Muppets. I wanted to be with them so bad. I wanted to be... And I spent almost an entire day at the Brownstone, but I didn't get in.
Damn.
And basically as an idea guy and an artist, and I didn't get in. But I did a lot of work in children's books. I did some work in advertising, and the rest of the time I was a janitor. I drove an ice cream truck. I was a security guard. I set pins in a bowling alley. That's how old this bowling alley was.
Holy
Wow.
yes, they weren't mechanized. There was, oh my God.
So yeah, you can tell people you met someone who set pins in a bowling alley. So I'd worked all kinds of what I call donkey jobs. And then whenever I had a chance, I went up to New York and interviewed at Marvel and DC again and again and again and again.
Wow. I forgot. I'm actually friends with Denny O'Neil on Facebook. And it's like, I think I brought that up to him years ago, and he never responded to me about it, though.
Wow.
That letter. But because I know that, there's been a lot of problems, because we just talked to Rick Stacy about this, too. And I know that you and a bunch of us talk about this on a regular basis, the problems within the industry, which is it's across the spectrum. It's hitting Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, and the comic industry, Marvel and DC both, this SJW issue. And it's changed what comics were. And because years ago, Tom Waltz and I had talked about this, that comics stopped being profitable right around 1975. And they started really only making their money off of licensing and merchandising. And the comics were there solely to create that potential revenue.
Right.
And it was worth it for them to break even, because they were breaking even. They just weren't turning a profit with comics. And now you see today with comics, which is they've changed the way the publishing works, the kind of paper it's printed on, to where now it costs basically $5 to buy a comic book, $4 to $5. And they're trying to say that the comics are thriving, and they're lying through their teeth, because comics have never thrived. So what is your thoughts on that? How they're doing it now? How can we save the comic industry from this downward spiral it's going into?
Well, I think that, when we're talking comics, we're generally talking the big two.
DC, Marvel, right.
Yeah, because they lead the pack. I mean, Marvel in particular. Marvel is the bellwether for the entire industry.
Because IDW's place at the table is solely over reprints, because they have the largest library of any of them for reprinting.
Well, there's that. They've got the iconic characters. The characters are more popular now than they've ever been, but they still can't sell a comic book because they've never found a way to make that popularity on TV and in movies translate into sales. I mean, never. When Batman Returns came out, our Batman sales actually went down.
They went down. That's right. And they went through this huge market trying to go up.
Yeah, parents were turned off by that movie, and they didn't want their kids reading comics. It doesn't get highly publicized, but that happened. But so particularly at Marvel, it basically began when they started bringing in people from other media, people from movies, television, and novelists to do the comics. People I call tourists, people who have no real interest in the future of comics,
That's a really good descriptor. I like that.
They have no real interest in the medium. They're not interested in seeing it thrive or continue like all of the rest of us are. And it's a resume enhancer or something cool to talk about at their next cocktail party. But it's not, their avocation. It's not in their blood the way it is with us and other comic creators. I mean, we volunteered to get into this silly business, and it's hard and it's heartbreaking and it's tough, but we stick with it because we just, for some reason, love this medium. And we got a lot of people who really don't give a crap about this medium, and it's obvious from the work. They hire writers who don't know what they're doing, don't understand how comic book works. They hire artists who I've never seen artwork this bad. And
oh yeah, we were making fun of one the other day with two people in the front seat and this person in the back seat and a dog. And the only thing good in that drawing was the dog. And
the dog was obviously traced from a photograph.
Yeah, it was traced from a photo. It was really funny.
And everybody else looked like, I don't know, I don't know. I mean, somebody did not go to anatomy school, did not go take life drawing, had no freaking clue what they were doing about anything. Panel composition. I mean, being a comic artist is tough. You got to know a lot of stuff. You've got to be a cinematographer. You've got to be a commercial artist.
Blocking is so essential in good comic book.
I mean, there was a discussion on one of these pages. I can't remember. And Andrew Paquette was doing some comic book pages.
Andrew, right?
And he did this. I've been at this for 30 plus years, and this conversation between artists fascinated me. He drew a page where typical comic book page, two characters are basically hanging off the window of a skyscraper on the 80th floor, while bad guys are on the floor above them. It's an exterior shot. And then below them, you see like all of a city, like all of lower Manhattan stretched out below them. And a buddy of mine, Sergio Cariello, said, this is a gorgeous page, but your perspective is slightly off. And Andrew explains that the perspective is slightly off on purpose to give you a vertigo feeling, to give you the feeling that this is a dangerous place to be and the height. So he threw the perspective off purposely. And I'm like, oh, these are the kind of guys I work with. These guys are freaking geniuses.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at this page we were talking about with the dog and the three people, and you're like, what the hell? My one sentence.
It's so flat.
Yeah, my one sentence capsulization of what's wrong with comics is Gerry Ordway does not have a monthly book. That tells you everything you need to know about the comic book industry right now. That somebody at the peak of their powers, either as a writer or an artist, does not have his own title.
Well, it's the same mindset that's going across the spectrum. It's like on CBS, to not have Ronald D. Moore or Ira Bear working on Star Trek is insanity. Those were the guys that did Star Trek Next Generation all the way through Deep Space Nine. And they understood Star Trek better than anybody. And they hire these people who've never even written science fiction before. It's all to sell some ideological idea that doesn't work in Star Trek. And which is odd because, in Star Trek, Roddenberry created kind of a utopia, which is borderline socialist in the way that they act. But it worked. I liked it. It was bullshit. It would never happen, but I loved it.
Well, it worked because they basically created a framework in which they can insert any high concept science fiction idea they wanted to.
Yeah.
And all of the normal daily crap we go through didn't get in the way of the story. The normal kind of conflicts you see in stories didn't exist in Star Trek because it got in the way of telling a good old-fashioned space opera story.
Well, you need to, and I've always said this, and I know you say it too. Before you throw your ideological crap in there, make sure you have a good story.
Right.
And if it doesn't fit, don't put it in there. If it doesn't work with the story, don't put it in. It's like it's story first, story first, period.
Well, again, when I worked with Denny O'Neil, he was editor on Robin. And I realized, I said, I hate message comics. And Denny knew how much I loathed his Green Arrow, Green Lantern comics. And
well, they weren't very popular for a reason.
no, they did not sell. They were
Nobody wanted to read that shit.
Nobody wanted to read it, and Neil Adams was never popular with the general readership as an artist.
No, he did not really become. I mean, after Batman, graphic novels is what set his career ablaze again. Working with what's his name, that asshole from England, Alan Moore.
Yeah,
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, but on Robin, I said we're dealing with a teenager,
Right,
as our hero, and I said he's not Archie Andrews. We've got to deal with real teenage issues, because the kids reading this, they go to school, they know what they're dealing with.
not just late for a date.
Right, exactly. Not just later. I said, I want to deal with guns in school, and I want to deal with teen pregnancy, and I want to deal with the drugs and all the rest of it, but I don't want to do message comics. And Denny agreed with me. He says, only do it if it suits the story. Only do it if you can get a story out. And that's how we approached it. So you got two guys on polar opposites of political spectrum who were able to agree on what was a good story and how to deal with these issues in the confines of the comic book. But we never just said, I want to present my political opinion here.
Yeah, and that's the sign of a good writer. In my opinion, the sign of a good writer is somebody that's more interested in telling a story than conveying an ideological concept.
Well, it's about, the school of writing that I like, that I subscribe to, is the invisible hand. I don't want you to think you're reading a story written by somebody. And I think every effort... God, that is so true. I make every effort not to insert myself into the story whatsoever.
No Deus Ex Machina, man. Let the reader...
Also that, and no personal touch. Nothing to reveal the man behind the curtain.
Which is one more reason why I fucking hate Alan Moore.
Well, Alan Moore's biggest talent, and I like a lot of Alan Moore's writing, his biggest talent is that his writing is like a crossword puzzle. Did you ever do a crossword puzzle and you get the clue, and it's an obscure one? The more obscure, the more pleased you are with yourself.
Right.
And you're like congratulating yourself because I was so smart. I got into the head of the crossword puzzle writer and I figured out his freaking clue. Alan Moore writes the same way. Readers congratulate themselves. Oh, I got that reference. And the more obscure reference that he makes that you get, the more you're patting yourself on the back for understanding his writing. And he makes you feel smarter than you are.
Yeah, it's true.
That's an appeal. And I say this as I really like his writing. I think at his best, he's one of the best guys ever to write a comic book. But at his most obtuse, well, God help.
I lost interest because, like, two of my favorite graphic novels, one of them I don't think Graham's a fan of, which is The Killing Joke. I actually liked it. You hate it too, so you and Graham both hate it.
Oh yeah, for the same reason.
I enjoyed it, and but I was in a very dark phase where I was very angry at the comic industry in 1986, and I had sold all but my collectibles. All my comics were gone. I swore I would never read a comic book again, and I never did. But that was the same year I got introduced to graphic novels, the same fucking year. And like my best friend I grew up with, who manages the website for Pop Culture Minefield, the Facebook page, he's like, yeah, but you got to read Watchmen and this Dark Knight Returns. I'm like, what are you talking about? What is this? Comic books? No, they're graphic novels. Like, all right, you made it sound sexy to me by adding the word novel. So I went and bought those two books.
But whenever anybody asks me what's the difference between a graphic novel and a comic book, I say about $15.
Yep. The one thing this is my defense of graphic novels and why I only like working on them and not comic books, is because I want to get my entire story arc in one graphic novel. But then I turned right around and I wrote Vindicated, and you have to get all 4 graphic novels to get the entire fucking story arc. I'm a dumbass. I admit it. I don't know why I did that.
Well, it's funny when in the 90s, when they began collecting these books and the trade paperbacks were selling,
variant covers and shit.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions on, how to write for the trade. And basically, we worked it out. Apparently, everybody's forgotten what we laid down. But, I mean, the point of writing for the trade was not to pad it out, not to come up with 3 issues of story and pad it out to 6. It was to come up with 6 issues that hung together in a continuity and it had a beginning, middle, and end. But each issue paid off in a way so that the reader reading only one issue would be as rewarded as if they had read all 5 or 6.
Exactly. But here, this once again introduces the problem I had, which was as I got older, I got tired of having to wait 30 days to find out what was going to happen the next issue. It's like, God damn it, what's going to happen? And
I think now people wait for the trade simply for the economics of it. It's just cheaper.
Yeah, and Keith and I have talked about this, that one of the ways we feel that they could save and salvage the industry is to go back to printing on cheaper paper.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and finding a way to get it in front of kids again.
Yeah, because 7-Eleven was where I went all the time. Jim Woodward, my buddy and I, we would go 7-Eleven, turn the little carousel, the spinner, and look for the comics we get, go up to the counter, buy them, walk outside, sit on the sidewalk right in front of the 7-Eleven and read our fucking comic books. That was our teens, and that was the way they need to do it again. But
they need to try to get comics out in front of as many people as possible. While graphic novels are good, and it got them into places where traditionally comics could not be, I think losing access everywhere else, barbershops, dentist offices, even convenience stores, losing that access has really hurt them.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like the comics skipped a generation. And the most shocking thing about it is they did it on purpose. I remember talking to Darwin Cook, and we found out that we had actually been at DC the same week pitching the same kind of concept. He showed up and he pitched an all-ages Wonder Woman comic because he looked at what Spider-Girl was doing for Marvel with tweeny girls. Sales were amazing on trades. They were selling 70,000 trade paperbacks of Spider-Girl in bookstores, and they were selling to tweeny girls, girls under 13. And Marvel never did anything to capitalize on that. They just kept trying to find ways to cancel that book as a monthly because they hated it.
Wow.
They didn't see the money. So Darwin and I, we found out about this because, we knew Tom DeFalco, we knew Ron Friends, and he came in and he pitched an all-ages Wonder Woman book, and he'd write it tweeny girls. And I came in the same week and pitched an all-ages Commandi book. And my idea was Commandi is so made for the tweeny audience, the young adult audience. It's in the title, Commandi, the last boy on Earth. And you got talking animals. I mean, there was ever a DC comic created for kids under 12. This is the one.
Mm-hmm.
And, neither one of us got anywhere. We were both told the same thing. We are not interested in that audience. This is when Harry Potter was like setting the world on fire. We are not interested. We do not want those readers. And it's like, and that's where it began. And you wonder why we are where we are now. It's because they were chasing this imaginary audience that didn't exist. There's these hipsters who live below 14th Street in Manhattan. And they thought that they would turn them on to comics, and it was never going to happen.
Well, that's been a problem all along because you would see that initial spike after like Batman the movie came out. There was this spike in sales, and they thought, "Oh, we finally broke the ice. We're gonna." It's like, no, it's gonna go. It levels off. Always levels back off.
Well, the other problem is that from its inception, comics never change. The comics are always about the money coming to them. They never went out and found the money. I mean, you look at Action Comics, okay? Superman, action number 1. Superman does not appear in the next couple of issues because they didn't plan on having Superman in the first issue. They only stuck it in because they were short for pages. It took them a month to realize there were no returns on Action 1. No issues of Action 1 were coming back from the newsstands. It was a sellout. And then they realized, well, what could it be? and it struck them, it might be this Superman guy. And that's what I mean. They had no idea what they were doing. They just threw crap against the wall to see if it would stick. And then when the money rolled in, they took it, but didn't think of how to capitalize on it beyond, we need another Superman. So they create Batman. Another kid walks in with a character. It's called Batman, and they run with that. But
Yeah.
but the
two characters that started the whole thing going. All right.
Yeah.
This is Taylor, our micro wolf.
Is it the show mascot?
It should be. You should be. She's so vicious. She's biting me. No, fuck off, baby.
But I mean, the last time that comics, one of the only times comics ever went out and pursued an audience and brought it back was Vertigo. The Vertigo line was meant to capture the imagination of the audience that it captured. And it was tailor-made for college-age comic book readers.
What we're doing
within the niche.
Right. But the thing is, they didn't move on from that niche. And I remember the first time I met Dan DiDio, the first time I'm sitting in his office waiting for him, he comes in and he's bitching about Vertigo. He says, we're carrying Vertigo. And I said, how are you carrying Vertigo when they've got 2 films in production and you don't have any? I think he stopped liking me right then and there. He didn't even get a chance to like me. I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm not one of these yes boss, that's a great idea kind of guys. But I'm like, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. Vertigo is extremely successful. What you needed to do was target your next audience. You needed to target tweeny girls, adolescent boys, lonely truck drivers. I mean, find another audience and target them and do what Stan Lee called plateau marketing. I mean, look what Stan Lee did in the 70s when the sales started to crash. They moved into the magazines. And that was a whole different audience. And Stan's idea was you move from kiddie comics to superheroes to Conan. And then Epic was supposed to be the next step. So we would have a comic for you no matter what age or level of maturity or sophistication you're at. And today they just don't give a crap about any of that. They don't even think about it.
No, their business plan makes no sense. It's like, and as we make fun of quite often, you've participated in it too. We make fun of this mindset of doubling and tripling down on bad ideas.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it didn't work. Well, what do you think we should do? Double down.
Let's blame the audience. The audience is too stupid to understand what wonderful work we're doing.
We have to keep trying to educate them.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't want to read about this, transgender, wheelchair bound, Samoan, because they're racists. Not because the comic freaking sucks, but because they're racists.
Yeah.
Now, I always use the example of Luke Cage and Black Lightning. Okay. 2 characters came along about the same time when the New York Times informed the comic book industry that a lot of their readership was African American. So they're going to leap on this audience and create these brand new characters. So they create Luke Cage. Basically, he's born out of the black exploitation films. And I'm reading the comics at this time. And it's like, I loved Luke Cage. He was awesome. He lived above a movie theater in Times Square. And he was just a badass. And then you go over to Black Lightning, and I can't remember a damn thing about Black Lightning because
I never read Black Lightning.
Create a character,
I never read him. Luke Cage I read.
Yeah.
Did you read?
I did. I read both.
Both.
But there was a distinct difference in how both of them were handled, and for me, Luke Cage was someone who was written in a way that was very of the era, of the moment. He was written as someone who you could actually see that person walking down the street, interact with that person, and have a good experience. Whereas Black Lightning was written more as kind of someone who was not quite real. I mean, it was a character that you could look up to. But compared to Luke Cage, wasn't really a real person. It was more or less like a constructed person.
Right.
But that's the difference between a lot of DC and Marvel to begin with. When it comes to their development of characters is Marvel became so popular because they were in real places, real cities with real problems. And I mean, that was my attraction to first Spider-Man, and then I graduated to Daredevil. And when Frank Miller took over Daredevil, that was it. That's all I wanted to read. And until you and Graham came in on Batman again, and I started reading Batman again.
That's another one that you look from the outside in at the industry. Do you know that Johnny Romita Jr.'s run on Daredevil sold twice what Frank Miller's run did?
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Because you have these perceptions about what's popular, and what's popular with fans isn't always popular with casual readers. It's like Kurt Swan's Superman always outsold Neil Adams's. But to the fans, it looked the opposite way. Oh, Neil's so popular. But, and that's the problem. That's another problem, is that they've abandoned casual readers. When they made a decision to abandon the newsstand, they abandoned casual readership. And those were my readers. I mean, I used to get the royalty statements, and my sales in comic shops were okay. My sales on newsstands were gangbusters. And that's
which titles?
Huh?
Which titles?
Any Savage Sword of Conan, which people used to laugh at. Oh, nobody.
I fucking love that thing.
Yeah, well, nobody in comic shops read it. It sold about 30,000, and this is when there were thousands of comic book shops. It sold about 30,000 in comic book shops. It sold about 60,000 in subscriptions, and it sold like 300,000 on the newsstand. And it was a royalty payer every month. It was a beautiful thing, and but it was looked down upon by most of the people in the comic book business because it wasn't a superhero.
Well, and that's and I can see where that would be a problem. Whereas for guys like Keith and I, we're not casual readers. We're avid readers, but we're also fans of Conan. I'm a huge Robert E. Howard fan. And so when I saw that come to life, I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to be reading that shit.
Right.
And I love the big tabloid annual.
The Treasuries.
Yes.
That was great stuff. Well, that was their effort to stay on the newsstand, because a lot of times the comics were being thrown off the newsstand because they were cheap. At the time, comics were like, I think 25 cents, 35 cents.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting thrown off the newsstand because news dealers were like, well, I could stick Sports Illustrated or Newsweek in that spot and make more money. So the Treasuries were an attempt to basically up the price scale, and stay on, because man, they were hemorrhaging on the newsstands back in the 70s.
Wow. Yeah, because that goes back to what Tom and I were talking about how comics just, right in the 70s, between 70 and 75, they were just barely making it, breaking even.
Well, and that's when I started going up looking for work. They had the implosion at DC where they laid off 40% of their staff. Over at Marvel, a lot of people don't remember this, but they had what they called the austerity program. And the artists were told to turn the artboard sideways and draw 2 pages on each page of artboard, basically same size as the comic.
Yeah, I just saw information about that in a documentary. I'm like, that's crazy.
That was a disaster. And then they tried to go even cheaper at the printers by going with paper plates instead of steel plates to print the comics, and that was a disaster. And the stuff just looked like utter crap. But they were trying to do anything to stay afloat because they were.
Is that when we started seeing a lot more muddied colors?
Oh yeah, muddy colors, just bad printing and bad artwork, because you can't draw it to size. Most guys couldn't draw it to size. They said John Buscema was the only guy that could do it.
Yeah, I draw on the stand, the 11 by 17. It's like
Well, imagine
everything reduces better.
Yeah, imagine drawing it sideways. I mean, and because I remember seeing originals from that time. I was like, my God, this stuff's awful. These poor guys. They're because reduction is your friend.
Well, let's trip into the days of Bane and your creation of Bane with Graham Nolan. What led to that? Who was inspired first?
Well, basically, Denny laid out the Nightfall stunt, he called it a stunt, to us, and it was going to be a 2-year continuity. And we knew that going in. And we knew at the first retreat, he laid out the framework for it. And the villain that was to break Batman's back, we knew it was going to be a new villain. Because Denny said, let's come out of the other side with a brand new villain. And but we didn't know his name. We didn't know anything about it. All we knew was he was going to break Batman's back and put Batman out of commission for a year or more. And so it wasn't until we started writing up to the point where this new villain had to be introduced that we had a kind of an emergency mini summit. And at this summit, we were throwing ideas around. And it was agreed that he would be addicted to venom. His working title was Doc Toxic. That was his name at the time. And we knew that he had to be Batman's intellectual and physical equal. And his only downfall was he was addicted to venom. That's all we knew about the character. And at this little mini summit, I began to argue that we've got to really work hard on this character, harder than we've ever worked before, because he has to succeed. He has to become popular with the readers. He has to capture their imaginations. Because if he doesn't, this whole Nightfall thing is going to fall apart. We got 2 years of continuity, and it's all on this character's back. And then he said, if you're so convinced of that it's going to be hard, then you do it. And he basically just sent me home. Said, come up with this guy. And I started thinking about Man in the Iron Mask. And I started thinking about he has to have a childhood as traumatic or more traumatic than Bruce Wayne's. He has to be a mirror of Bruce Wayne in that something horrible happened to him when he was a kid. And I just happened to read about how in North Korea, you could be jailed for something a relative did. So if your father robbed a bank and they caught you and you had nothing to do with it, you could be put in prison.
Wow.
Punishment by proxy. I thought, well, man, what if somebody was born in a prison to serve their father's life sentence?
Yeah, sins of the father.
Yeah, and then that's where it all started germinating. And then I got on the phone with Graham because I knew he'd be drawing Vengeance of Bane #1, which was the intro. And we started talking about the character, and we thought, well, the prison is going to be a Central American or Caribbean prison. And Graham said, well, what if he has a luchador look? Because that goes along with the venom and the pumping up and all that stuff. And he sent me some drawings over the old fax machine, and we were off to the races. And Bane, I came up with the name Bane by looking through the thesaurus. I just looked up evil. What's another word for evil? Bane.
Bane.
So it must be cool. So many people have stolen it since then. And I called the guys at DC and I said, I want to call this character Bane. They're like, we hate that. That's a stupid name. We hate it. And I said, well, just let it rattle around your head for a few days. And I never heard another word about it. It just, after about a week or so, everybody just started calling him Bane. And there was never any more discussion about the name. So that was it.
Well, how did you win them over, though? I mean, did they just accept it at that point?
They just started calling him Bane.
Okay.
Because they were calling him Doc Toxic up until then, and we knew that was a stupid name.
Yeah.
So it was just like they had to get used to calling him that. It's like when you name a pet or you name a kid, you kind of have to get used to calling them that. You have to get used to associating that child or that animal with that name. And then after a while, it's indelibly wedged in your mind. I mean, you're never going to forget your dog's name. You're never going to forget your son or daughter's name, because and that's what happened. It is the personality and the look just became wedded to the name Bane. And it's an awesome name. I mean, come on.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Because, what, Keith?
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to compliment the name, too, because I like it.
They stole it for Star Wars. And then I saw recently there's something out there and they call something the Bane. I'm like, well, there we go again.
Yeah, thieving bastards.
Yeah, well, nothing you can do about it.
And so far, the closest we've ever gotten to an adaptation of Bane, at least in look, was in that silly Batman and Robin movie. And he looked great. He was just dumb.
That's him deadlifting the bat signal. That's an awesome scene. I wish it was in a much better movie.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, and don't get me wrong, I like Tom Hardy a lot, and I enjoyed the film, but their interpretation of Bane was just not right. It was.
Well, they presented him as a mastermind. They presented him as a chess player, which I liked, and they made him a household name, which I liked. So everybody knows who Bane is.
That's some more paychecks for you, eh?
Well, it keeps the character alive, keeps the character part of the canon, and it keeps the Legos coming and the participation in video games, all that coming.
Now, I had heard in the rumblings, though, that the reason why you and Graham, there we go,
because of Dark Knight Rises. So,
yes.
a $100 action figure. I mean, without Dark Knight Rises, it wouldn't have happened.
Now, I'm going to point out that some people I've heard the rumblings say that the reason why you got this latest gig with Bane was because you didn't get some of the royalties you were supposed to get.
Yeah, I don't really want to go public with that, but yeah, it was kind of contractual obligation comic.
Yeah, and it is really good, by the way. Really good. It's really good. I have my copies, and I will be getting them signed by you too.
Okay. I just wish they had marketed it more, but because it was kind of shoved down their throat, they resented it.
Did they? Yeah, because, well, they got themselves into pickle, and I won't go any further than that, but, it's like, you made this happen. And I'm glad you guys got it, because
I don't mind talking about there were things done at DC in the early 2000s where basically the people that ran DC Comics at that time allowed Warner's to renegotiate the definition of net receipts. And what that meant is that DC gets far less for movie and TV things than they did in the past. Which is why when the check came for Dark Knight Rises, it was approximately the same amount we got for Batman and Robin. And it's like, well, wait a minute. He's in the whole freaking movie. He's in the whole movie as much as Batman is. That's because they had moved the goalposts on us. As Graham says, if Paramount made Dark Knight Rises, we would have been multimillionaires. So
yeah.
So that's the way that works. But they're starting to get better about that stuff. DC is starting now to pay for story content, which is something I haven't seen a check for story content since Paul Levitt's left. But when they use our story ideas, they're giving us a little cash, which is nice.
Because I think I saw one of your posts about that.
Yeah,
where you were like, hey, I got paid. Yeah,
because they rip off.
I like that change.
All the time, but Dark Knight Rises alone. All the No Man's Land stuff and all the Nightfall stuff they used, and we didn't see any money for any of that. But I got to check, and it listed specific issues for the last season of Gotham. Specific issues of Nightwing and Robin and Detective where they took story elements from.
And the single worst version of Bane ever.
Oh my God! It looked like something from an '80s children's show.
It looked like, remember Marvel in the 80s when they did the first Avengers live action? Yeah, it's right in there.
Yeah, it looked like there was an old show called Captain Power, and this Bane looked like he might have been an extra in the background of that show.
Yeah, and the actor was just not right. Not right for the part.
Yeah,
nice callback there. Nice callback. Captain Power.
It's I've definitely, there's been a lot of bad Banes, but that's the worst one by far.
But the most exciting. Oh, I'm sorry, Keith. You got one more question?
Well, no, I was just gonna ask. Writing for Batman, how does one make the transition in writing for Batman and writing for Nightwing? Because I really enjoyed your run on Nightwing. That's really what solidified you with me and made me a major fan of yours.
Well, Nightwing initially was going to be written by Denny O'Neil and Alan Grant, and for whatever reason they bowed out of it. And Scott Peterson said, "Would you be interested in writing Nightwing?" I'm like, "Well, I thought that slot was filled." And they said, "No, it's not working out. Could you write Nightwing? Your first script is due in 3 weeks, and Scott McDaniel's going to be your artist." And I had recently seen Scott on something he did, and I was blown away. So I'm like, yeah. And I said, well, what's my directive? And they said, well, it takes place in this new city called Bloodhaven. And I said, well, what's Bloodhaven like? And they said, you're going to make that up. And I said, well, so what else do you want every issue? And Scott Peterson said, we want a Jackie Chan movie every issue. And I said, okay. And I had about 3 weeks to think about it. I wrote an essay creating Bloodhaven, giving it a back history so there would be a look to it. I based it partly on Camden, New Jersey, partly on Manayunk, Pennsylvania. And we went from there. Scott McDaniel actually has a degree in engineering. So he was able to make that city come to life. I mean, he knew exactly what I wanted. And there's very few comic book environments that comes to life to that degree as Bloodhaven did. We worked really hard on it. And then my other thing going into it is that Nightwing liked being Nightwing. He enjoyed being Nightwing in a way that Batman never enjoyed being Batman, and that he was more casual about it. And the biggest thing about Dick Grayson and what makes him different from all these other non-superpowered vigilantes is he's a natural. He was actually born to this because he's a born athlete, born gymnast, all the rest of it. And those were basically my guidelines going in. And we just hit it. And I never stopped writing. I had 12 issues written before Scott McDaniel ever laid a pencil on a page for issue 1. I wrote the whole first year. And I wrote it as a 2-part. So it was 2 trades with complete stories in each, but wrapped up at the end of the year. Like basically it was a crime epic that I wanted to present. And I wanted to create, because we were getting participation, I wanted to create a whole new Rose Gallery for Nightwing. So I worked overtime creating new villain after new villain after new villain for him.
You did a phenomenal job in doing that, because that's part of the reason why the book spoke to me. I mean, it wasn't that it wasn't that I had fallen out of favor and didn't like Batman anymore, but you had introduced so much new and incredible stuff with Nightwing, and you made it live, you made it breathe, and yet you also, in having, as you explained, a character like Dick Grayson who enjoyed being who he was, it really gave the entire comic just a different kind of feel, and that was amazing.
Well, I was determined that it not be Batman Light or Batman Diet Batman. I wanted to have its whole own flavor. I mean, if you notice, Dick Grayson talks in an entirely different way than Bruce Wayne. He has a completely different voice than Bruce Wayne. You know, and you know, with Scott along, Scott was one of the few artists that if I got to an action set piece, like the one where he's dangling under that helicopter for page after page, I would get to a set piece like that, and I would just tell Scott, go crazy for the next 7 pages. Here's where it begins. Here's where it has to end. And here's the dialogue. And he would just make all that crazy stuff happen all on his own.
You guys are on fire. And literally, I think for me, you opened up a whole new level of entertainment within DC Comics during that period. I mean, you explaining that it had to be Jackie Chan. That's exactly what I was thinking. It just had that feel, and it was real, it was gritty, and yet it was all of its own thing with all its own characters. It felt like a television series mixed with, it really did feel like the way that they had put together the Netflix Daredevil season 1. I mean, it was just amazing. Great job.
As I said, I got to write the whole year at one time, and which gave me the luxury of going back, and fixing anything that didn't work and filling in, Easter eggs and continuity things that would reward the reader later on. So I got to do that. I work way ahead of schedule normally, just as practice. But on this one, I really wanted it to be something special. Because I knew what I had with Scott McDaniel. I had lightning in a bottle, and I was going to take advantage of it. And he knew it too, because if you notice, during his whole run, there's no fill-in issues. This guy drew his own fill-in issues because we used to have to do inventory issues. I would have to write a 1-issue story drawn by an artist. They would have it in the drawer in case somebody ran into scheduling problems. Well, Scott drew them all. He drew all the inventory issues. And he drew like the Wizard 1/2 and the Zero issue. He did all that stuff. And then we did a Prestige book in the middle of it. You know,
wow. I mean, yeah.
Just totally on fire. Guy's amazing. Still amazes me. We just recently did a Nightwing story. It's going to be out actually next week, I think, in the new Robin 100 pager. We did an 8-page Nightwing story that set during Cataclysm. So, yeah, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. I basically crammed the whole issue into 8 pages. It doesn't.
That sounds fantastic.
Man, he did it. Scott just nails it again.
So what do you think about the interpretation of Nightwing in other media, like what they use him for with a lot of the more recent Batman animated films, and of course using, a character that was really based on your version of Nightwing on the Titan series?
Yeah, I'm not really aware of any of this stuff. I mean, my youngest son watches this stuff, but I don't really remain that aware of it. So I used to watch the Batman animated series, but I was in the mix then,
Yeah.
I mean, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm were at the DC offices as often as I was in that period. So there was a real synergy going on between us and the animation guys. But I'm not involved with it anymore. So
If I were you, I would check out Son of Batman and Batman versus Robin.
No, I'll take a look at it. I'll take a look at it. So,
well,
we could move on to the last part of this, which of course is talking about the new project, which you and Graham just finished, or at least part of it.
Yeah. Which
is the Expendables.
Yep. The Expendables go to hell.
What a name.
Well, it wasn't me that came up with it.
Who came up with it?
Sly came up with it. And I call him Sly because he makes me call him Sly. I called him Mr. Stallone 3 times, and he said, they call me Sly. So he wanted to do a movie called Expendables Go to Hell, but he knew he'd never get it greenlit because it was a crazy premise and the budget would have been out of sight. And he was telling me about it. And I said, well, what is it? And he goes, well, they literally die, go to hell, and fight Satan. And I'm like, yeah, you're never going to get a movie made out of that. But it would make a hell of a comic book. And it took a little while. And then we got together with Richard Meyer, who was the biggest Expendables fan in the world. And we did it. When I called Richard to tell him about it, because I talked to Sly about it first, and I told him about Richard and told him about his awesome crowdfunding abilities and his military record. And Sly said, yeah, let's go ahead and do this with him. And I called Richard and I said, I'm going to tell you something, but promise me you'll be sitting down when I tell you. And so I tell him all about the Expendables Go to Hell and how, we'll be able to do it. And Richard said that for the first 15 minutes, he didn't realize I was talking about the actual Expendables. He thought I meant something like the Expendables. And then he said, when I kept mentioning Sly's name, he's like, wait a minute. You mean the actual Expendables from the movies? I said, yeah, Sly and Dolph Lundgren and, all the gang, Jason Statham, we can use all those characters. And then he says, well, I'm glad I was sitting down.
He was not prepared.
And I had pages written that day, and we had art by the end of the week. I mean, we just went rolling on this thing.
Nice. And here's this is the first drawing that Graham did.
Yeah, so this is the very first thing. It was done by Friday. I had it off to Sly, and Sly's 2-word response was fucking awesome. And we just went from there. So, yeah, so it's been a lot of fun. I mean, they go to hell. They meet a bunch of historical figures. They meet Audie Murphy. They meet General Custer. They meet Saddam Hussein, Adolf Hitler. I mean,
you had me at Audie Murphy.
Yeah. Audie's a big part of it. Basically, we find out Audie was always an expendable, that the Expendables go far back into the past. I mean, Barney Ross, Sly's character, meets Musashi Miyamoto, and Miyamoto has the same tattoo on his arm as Barney Ross does. So he was an expendable too.
Wait a second. The great double sword samurai Miyamoto Musashi?
Yep.
Fuck yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's a.
I think you just sold a book.
I admire that guy.
When I sent the script to Richard, he said, I went to college and got a degree in military history, and he says I had to Google half of these names.
How can you have a degree in military history and not know who Miyamoto Musashi is?
Yeah, I'm a history nut, man. I just went crazy.
Ditto. And then Julia, just so I want to point out, Julia Dye and I, Dale Dye's wife, started working on an idea, and IDW was really keen on it when we told it to him, which would be a variant story of the Three Musketeers, but with samurai, and D'Artagnan is Miyamoto Musashi when he was young.
Oh, wow, that's cool. I like that.
And I did some artwork for it, and she did a basic synopsis for it based off of what I said. And but IDW ended up not. That was a weird transitional period for IDW, right around 2012 to 2014. A weird
transitional period.
Yeah, it's just I haven't even tried to get work over there, mostly because I'm just kind of waiting for things to settle down again before I approach Tom about doing some work over there.
Yeah, I got a whole miniseries, drawn, colored, lettered, sitting on a shelf over there. It's been sitting there for like 2 years.
Can you say the name of it?
It's Unprepped.
Unprepped.
It's a survivalist comedy.
Oh.
And I really
come on! It's got to be the best slapstick ever.
It gets really crazy. And my thing was it's tailor made for a feature for streaming, one of the streaming services, but I can't convince them to publish it.
Not even for their online.
That was it. I said, just put it out digitally, just so I have a place to point people to, because they're a partner in it. They would make money off it too, but I'll probably just end up having to buy it back from them.
Well, if you're able to do that, Netflix would be a good choice.
Yeah, I mean, we already Scott Beatty and I wrote it together, and we were populating it with Jennifer Aniston and Jason Sudeikis, and we do like that. This would be this character. This would be this character. It's tailor made.
That sucks.
Yeah, well,
I'd like to see that. But the Expendables. Now, how many issues is this?
It's a one-shot graphic novel. It's like, I think, 100 pages. Graham Nolan did most of the art, but we've got Butch Geis. We got Kelsey Shannon. We got a couple other guys, a couple of Richard Myers guys. The artwork's just gorgeous throughout on the whole thing. And then we got, a hardcover with a beautiful Dave Dorman painting. But it's a full-size graphic novel done in one. And because it's been so successful, we're going to continue. Sly said as long as everybody's happy, we'll just keep doing Expendables projects.
Hell yeah. I'm all for it.
I got 2 movie treatments I wrote for them that they didn't use, and we might just make graphic novels out of them.
Yeah, didn't you write the first treatment for the first film?
No, they brought me in to write a treatment for the second one.
Was that it? Okay. I read that somewhere.
And they wouldn't pay the kind of money I wanted, but the benefit was I got to meet Sly, and he kept in contact. He kept reaching out to me. He got me work doing web content for Lionsgate, and then he got me a job writing the dialogue for the Expendables video game. So he's always kind of stayed in touch and kept me in mind.
That's fantastic, dude.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. He's a very rare guy in Hollywood, somebody that actually remembers you.
Yeah, it's like Clint Eastwood actually is kind of like that too.
Yeah, I hear that. He's just Joe Normal guy.
It's like almost to a fault, because the military advisor he uses is not very good, and but he swears by him because of their relationship that they've worked.
Yeah. I just read a book by William Goldman, and he talked about walking down the street with Clint Eastwood in Baltimore when they were on a shoot, and Clint was hungry, and he heard this cafeteria was good, and he walks into the cafeteria and gets in line with a tray. He says, Dirty Harry just gets in line with a tray, just Joe Normal,
It's it's really weird. It's hard for the mind to wrap around that someone could be that down to earth and just normal. But a lot of people I know in Hollywood, Dale Dye in particular, it's just very down to earth people, the people I like. The actors.
Dale Dye. The thing that always strikes me about him is how earnest he is. It must be very frustrating for him to work with Hollywood types who just
it's a mix.
Don't really care if they get it right or not.
I think that his frustration, and I'm not, you know what, I'm not going to assume his frustration. What I'll say is, what I would be frustrated with is when he has done so much for some of these guys, some of it pro bono, you know, to help them, these big names. And when it comes time for him to ask for a return favor, you know, only 2 of them showed up.
Well, well, you know, comics are the same way. I mean, you could save an editor's ass on a deadline, you never remember it. Unless you get it in writing, you're not getting anything out of doing anybody a favor in comics.
And that really sucks. It really does. And
yeah, I mean, I had a time where they asked me for a big favor, and I said, this favor is so big, I want it in writing. I want a laundry list of all the stuff you're going to greenlight for me if I do this for you.
And did you get it?
Every one of them done, yeah.
Batman
Devil's Advocate was on the list. Batman Predator 3, that one really hurt because they had to go to the legal department.
And that is why Graham hates Predator.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. He's funny. He's just got things he doesn't like to draw.
And those are 2, because we were talking, and those Huey, helicopters, and the Predator were the 2 he hated. And of course, mine was the horses.
Yeah, well, see, when I did Batman Predator, I did it with Rodolfo DiMaggio. And when I first started working with Rodolfo, I always asked artists, what do you like to draw? I mean, Joe Kubert said, I love to draw weather. You know, okay, I'll give you lots of weather. And I asked Rodolfo, what do you like to draw? He said, attack helicopters. And I said, man, I love you. I love you, man. I put helicopters in everything. I mean, I never liked the idea of the Batcopter, but man, Batman Predator 3 had a Batcopter in it.
Because Graham and I were talking about the advent of using Google 3D modeling.
Right.
And because I started doing that in 2006 when John Aldering from Marvel and I did a few pages for City of Fire about the actual battle on June 24th of 2004. And we were talking about what happened in that battle. And the big part of it was those strikers with the slat armor on them.
Right.
And we couldn't draw that slat armor because it's so thin.
Right.
So what do? He and I worked together, and he did almost all the sculpting on that. Really, I give him all credit for that. He built a 3D striker with slat armor to where we could render it from any angle and then ink over it.
Well, when I was at CrossGen and we were doing the pirate book, El Cazador, I said, you know, the reason why there's never been a monthly pirate book is the freaking ships, you know, and so we bought a program with like a dozen wireframe pirate ships, you know, different types, galleons and sloops and frigates. And then Steve Epting was able to make wireframe models and turn them any which way he wanted and then render from that. This is really the only way to do it and do them accurately.
Yeah, because there was a book I worked on that had a lot of warships from the War of 1812 in it. I did the same thing. I sculpted them all in 3D.
Wow. Because the people that like that stuff, man, if you get a spar out of place, they're on your ass.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so the ones I had were all accurate, down to details of the deck, what weapons were on the deck, how many ropes were on the deck. But that book will never see the light of day. And there was a conflict between me and the creator. And I won't let anybody screw me over for money. Don't lie to me about money. You know, be honest with me. I will do things, Nick. I will charge very little for a book if you're paying out of pocket. But if you tell me you're paying out of pocket and you actually have investors, we got a problem. And that's what happened on that project. And so it'll never see the light of day.
Yeah, I mean, since I left working the big two, my 2 questions on any new project is, do you have the money, and where does it come from?
Well, it's so bad now. I don't even want to work for anybody.
Huh?
I don't even want to work for anybody anymore. It's such a soured experience that I just was like, I just want to work on my shit.
Yeah,
things that bond my friends.
I work for people I trust. You know, I work for people that never lied to me and kept their promises. You know, I do a lot of work for Richard Meyer. I do a lot of work for Vox Day, because they pay when they say they were going to pay, and what they were going to pay. They keep their promises. And other than that, I'm working on, on my own, with prose novels and stuff like that. So, but it's hard. It's hard to put a comic deal together because, even guys like Vox and Richard, they want to do their ideas, not your ideas. So they're still gatekeepers to a certain extent. Although Richard has offered me an opportunity to do some of my own stuff, with his help.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew Tommy Castillo or not.
Huh?
Did you know Tommy Castillo?
Yeah.
Tommy's an old friend of mine, and it was sad when we lost him.
Yeah.
Once again, diabetes, man. Don't mess around. Don't mess around with it. Take care of yourself. Diabetes eventually killed him. And but Tommy had called me one day and gave me the best advice when it came to Vindicated. And it's why I haven't gone and published it yet, because I want it to be the best book I can make. He said, don't go to any of the publishers, self-publish. You're going to put more effort into it than anybody's going to ever put into it for marketing it.
Yeah, it's true.
And that was straight. And he says, and if you need help, I am there. And then the prick died on me.
Everything's changed in the business. Everything's changed how it works. Because I was just talking on Facebook, private messaging with a guy who's still in with the big two. Still, that's his thing. And I was just telling him, it's so
God bless him if they can do it, really.
Yeah, and he's talented and he's a good guy and everything else, and he deserves, all the success he has. One of my favorite creators. But I said, man, it's so different out here. It's a wilderness out here. You got to wear so many different hats.
What are you going to say, Keith?
Prose, I'm writing comics. I'm writing, mobile games. I'm writing. I just had a guy.
Yeah, I've seen you're all over the place, and I like that. That's how you stay busy, making money.
Yeah. I miss the days when you were given a book and you just settle in for a couple of years.
Well, that's what it was for me when I first started doing graphic novels. My first graphic novel took me an unbelievably short period of time. It was a 77-page graphic novel for IDW, and I had 30 days to draw it.
Jeez Louise.
And they actually said that I broke a record drawing that book. And I even went in there because I got mad at the colorists and fixed some of their coloring. I got really pissed at some of the coloring that was done.
You must be drinking the same brand of coffee Jack Kirby used to drink to turn out that many pages that fast.
Well, you know about my daughter Zoe. She said that I was really difficult to live with.
Our family's going through that with me, Dory.
It's like I was getting 3 hours a night of sleep. And that was it. And but I finished that book on deadline, and I'm not happy with it to this day. But I got the rights back to it, and right. I'm working with Dale and Julia to re-release it, and I'm doing some new artwork for it to fix some of the shit that bugged me. Yeah. And also planning to do a sequel that talks about Extortion 17 when we lost a lot of those SEAL team members in the shooting down of Extortion 17. Yeah. And then we're also doing that latest mission that just happened with the rescue mission, and where they named it after that poor young girl that was killed.
Right.
And we're going to do, it's like, that's our plan. We haven't pulled the trigger yet, but this is something Dale, Julie, and I have all talked about. And I brought Richard Bonk into the conversation. I said, I'm supposed to be writing it, not drawing it, which I'm apprehensive about, but Dale likes my combat, the way I write combat, because it's very realistic. I have guys doing what they actually would be doing in combat. I wrote a battle in one that Richard Bonk drew. You haven't seen it yet. I'll send it to you. It's 22 pages. But the battle isn't in there yet because it's in the last 22 pages. It's a 44-page graphic novel. And I have a battle between a tier 1 level combat team and mutated baboons. Not just baboons, those fucking orange ass ones with the crazy 4-inch fangs, and the guy there's this funny scene with the guy who keeps calling him monkeys, and the second lieutenant's like, they're not fucking monkeys. Stop calling them that. And there's an actual story in there, I will not share it on this show, that actually happened to me when he has to pull the skull out of the fangs out of this guy's arm, retract it out of his arm at the end of the book. And in order to calm him down, he tells a story about a guy who got bit in the dick by a cat. It's an absolutely true story, and Julia fucking lost her shit reading that, going, "That's your story." I went, "Yeah, it's my story when I got bit in the dick by a cat." I was in the Army when that happened. And I remember looking at the triage nurse, and she's like, as I'm like telling her where I got bit, I'm like going, she's like that. And I went, "What? It wasn't like I was fucking it." You've actually been amused by some of my military anecdotes when I rate them. You actually said one time you were going to borrow one of them from me. I was like, "You borrow anything you want from me, man. You're the bomb. I steal from you and Graham all the time."
That's what Nietzsche said. A writer uses his own and his friends' intellects.
Every single character in my stories are real people. They're all based on real people. One of the villains was a villain in my life. I wrote him, kept his name too. And in Vindicated, one of the main villains is a corrupt SWAT commander, and he's named after my vice principal from high school who gave me a lot of shit. And so I call him Mr. Blaylock in the book. It's like fuck people if they, It's about. I said it to somebody recently. If you want best revenge, put somebody you don't like in one of your books and kill them.
Yeah,
it really makes you feel good. And do it very creatively. Bomb up the butt, whatever you want to do.
There's a couple of screenwriters who are actually friends. It's Scott Frank and I forget the other guy's name. And there's prolific screenwriters, and they always put something in each other's screenplays of using the other guy's name. And it's always like if they need the name of like a child molester, or they always use their friend's name in place of it. And it's never a character in the story. It's always just mentioned in passing.
One of the writers that was working on Vindicated with me put my name in there as a fucking child molester. And I kept it in there because I thought it was so fucking funny. Even though I rewrote everything, I kept that character's name as my name.
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought that was hilarious. It's like, yeah. But what do you got on the burners now? What's next?
I told Richard I'd do another project with him, which I don't want to talk about. It's too early. I have a series that should be published soon from a new company called Phenom. It's called Hunter Ninja Bear, and it's set in the early 1800s. And it has mountain men, ninjas, and bears in it. That's all I can really say. But it's it's not my concept, it's their concept.
Okay, it has
brilliant
bears, ninjas,
and mountain men. Basically mountain men.
I don't know why, but I'm thinking of the thing from Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Mountain men, ninjas, and bears. Oh my!
It was this brilliant. Oh my. Brilliant concept these guys brought to me, and they said basically they just wanted me to dramatize. They had all the characters laid out and everything else, and I'm working on it with Mel Ruby and Rob Hunter and Ivan Nunez on the colors. And it is freaking gorgeous. It's a 12-issue thing. They're on the 11th issue, and these guys still haven't published the first issues. There's a ton of great stuff on the show. And then I got a new Levon novel coming out in a few weeks. It's called Levon's Home. And if your viewers aren't familiar with Levon, basically I created him to scratch my Punisher itch. He's a former Marine with a 14-year-old daughter. He can't seem to stay out of trouble.
Yeah, because I've read one of them, and I put it right up there with what Dale does with his Shake Davis series.
Yeah.
Thematically, and it's still the same Punisher, military background guy, high adventure, action, family. I love that stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of stuff I grew up reading. Paperback novels I grew up reading, and like Richard Stark stuff. And I just enjoy it. I didn't really want to get into prose. I've always wanted to be a comic writer, but I got in at the tail end of the ebook gold rush.
You gotta, you gotta do what you love, and you have to find a way to make money at it.
Yes.
And you made the smart move, in my opinion. I mean, Stallone made that deal with you with the other project. It was Levon, isn't it?
Yeah, Levon. He's optioned Levon for a TV series through Balboa Productions.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, God damn it. It's so weird, you know. You do such cool shit, and once again, I have to pinch myself and remind myself, oh, that's right, we're friends. We know each other. If you mention my name to him, he knows who I am. That's weird.
Like, oh, that guy, a child molester. Yeah.
Oh, that fat child molester. I know that bastard.
I read about him somewhere.
He's kind of a dick. Somebody actually said that in the interview. She says, I got to know Gerry. Yeah, he really is kind of a dick with his sense of humor. He'll just say whatever the fuck to you. He loves you, but he'll just say it just to fuck with you. It's like when I was playing in a band, one of my favorite moments of my dickishness, I met this kid named Danny Martellino. He's a friend of, his wife is on my Facebook page. He's not, because he doesn't have Facebook. But he was the bassist in my band back in the 80s. And little Filipino guy, really nice guy, cool pompadour Hawaiian hairstyle. Like, what's his name? The big singer from Hawaii. What was it? Don Ho. Yeah, Don Ho. And he walked up and he said his name. My name is Danny Martellino. And I said, Martellino, what's your cultural background? And he says, well, I'm half Filipino and half Spanish. And my next words made him and I endeared myself to him. I said, what are you telling me? That you're a really great lover, but you have a small dick? And he just was like, and then he just started laughing. He goes, oh, dude, that's the funniest shit ever.
Something like that. You're either going to be the worst enemies or best friends from that point on.
Well, I grew up in that environment where you're kind of caustic to your friends. The better your friend, the more caustic you are to them.
Yeah.
And in the military, it's like, you fucking retard. That's what you say to people you care about.
Right.
Shut up, you fucking retard. Or fucktard. You fucktard. Because that's the military, the contraction of those two words. Keith, you got anything last you want to say, brother?
It's been a real pleasure, Chuck. I mean, again, big fan. You've been keeping me entertained for a long time. Listening to both you guys has just been an absolute pleasure. But thank you. Thank you for coming and doing this.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
We'll do it again when you've got something that you want to showcase.
Okay.
Make sure to get you on here. And and I would always try to keep it as a bookends with you and Graham because, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be friends with him.
Graham's awesome.
Yeah, I know. I think he's the best. And I told somebody, I said, you know that you become friends with somebody when their wife follows you. Because Julia's on my page all the time, and she enjoys my posts. And I went, I've scored with Graham when his wife is following me too.
Awesome. She's awesome too.
But anyway, Chuck, I love you, man. You're a good guy. I love the way you respect our veterans. And and I've always said that to you. I like the way you depict them in your stories. You respect them. You don't treat them like automatons that are just following orders. They're just not that. And you always get that.
They deserve that kind of respect. They're growing up, these guys were heroes to me.
As to me too. It's why I joined. I wanted to be like those guys. Yeah. But that's it, guys. That's Chuck Dixon, and down yonder here, that's Keith.
And that's Gerry.
And this is Pop Culture Minefield, and we're out of here.
Hey guys, thanks for watching Pop Culture Minefield. If you've enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon. Remember, you can find us at Pop Culture Minefield on both Facebook and Instagram. Thank you again.
Y'all come back now, you hear?